Welcome to Demono's Pod, episode 8 with Tino and Matt. What's up, Matt?
Going well, going good.
We this episode we are going to review our top 10 second base prospects in dynasty format. This is a fun one. Started to get into some deeper pools, some better players. Catcher and first base was a bit of a slog. We needed some evening assistance to get us through that first base pod. What's going on, man?
It's going good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've somebody posted there was a meme yesterday that we were at the point where we're closer to spring training than we are from the end of the World Series.
Nice.
And football is almost over, which is good because I don't like any of the teams in there. I do like Mahomes a lot, but
you don't like the Chiefs or the Eagles?
I like their coach a lot. I like his fire. Yeah, I like Jalen. He's cool too. He made me feel better because I can't sing worth shit. And did you hear him sing the Eagles?
Yeah, so bad.
Yeah, and he even stopped because he thought it was so funny.
It was so bad. He was so tone deaf. It's horrible. No, it is cool.
But when the Niners, the Niners talked a lot of shit. So and then they were kind of being punks at the end, I think. And I like how Nick turned around and after that last ejection and fights, he asked the crowd to stand up and to cheer. So he was disciplining his players at the same time, but I just like that fire in the coach, right? That we're not going to back
fun.
down.
It's the first Super Bowl with two African-American quarterbacks starting, which is kind of cool too.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know.
I like that, yeah.
But yeah, should be good. I like both teams. I've got a good friend who's an Eagles fan. Shout out Jake. So I guess I'm rooting for the Eagles just to see him be able to celebrate that. I guess Jason Collette is a Chiefs fan, but he's more of a Seahawks fan now. Anyways, it should be fun. It should be a lot.
Yeah, and I feel bad for the Bengals player that pushed Mahomes out. He's moving so fast, and it was painful to see. Even though I'm not I'm a Browns fan, so I'm not a Bengals supporter, but I felt bad for him at the end there. It's a split second choice, right?
Right.
And I get when I played golf competitively, I would break clubs, but that's like slow motion, slow sport, right? you have time to catch your cool, and I was too stupid not to catch my cool. But that poor guy, it was just a split, less than a second decision. So
right. I felt horrible for him, and watching him cry was pretty cool. All right, man. Second base, good times. Maybe my second favorite player in baseball heads this list, I hope, on both of our lists. Julio's number one, but I could make an argument for Termarr Johnson being my second favorite player in baseball at this point in time. Is he your number one as well?
Well, I need to be consistent. I don't have any FYPD guys as one. He's my two.
Okay.
He has the highest ceiling.
Okay. So why don't you have any FYPD guys as at one?
I like to see proof. I like to see them hit at least get to high A, and I know he's uber elite, but Holiday, even if Holiday was even if Holiday didn't have that competition, I'd be hesitant. So I just want to see a bit of proof. He did show a bit of proof. He had that outstanding walk rate and limited bats he had. But I just like to see a little more. But I'll give you he has the highest ceiling. And it'd be boring if we both had the number one and we agreed.
It just makes one of us right and one of us wrong. So who's your number one?
My number one is Jackson Merrill. And I'm listing him at second because that's how Baseball America has him listed. So that's my excuse. And you inspired me last week as far as where you have a position that maybe isn't as strong as shortstop or outfield, looking for players that are eventually going to move over there. And I think he has the highest chance. There's other players like Andy Rodriguez may get eligibility there.
Sure.
He played 20 games in the minors last year, and there's going to be that logjam at second if Davis gets his act together. And I know you don't like this, but Volpe maybe. Peraza, if he's the one, maybe Peraza's at second, Volpe's at third. They do something else at shortstop. But anyway, so Merrill kind of represents the players that maybe shift to second, that may have more proximity than Johnson. But I'm not going to have a big argument that Johnson isn't one as far as ceiling and elite potential. That's certainly there. I do see some elite in Merrill though.
What is it? So let's talk about Jackson Merrill for a bit here. I have him listed as a shortstop. I don't. The only thing that gives me a little bit of hesitation in putting him at second is he is 6'3", and I know that we have another 6'3" player. I have another 6'3" player on my list as a second baseman, Curtis Mead. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities, but I do wonder, especially with the new shift rule and a second baseman kind of a bit more on an island than he has been previously, whether a taller player like Merrill stays in the middle of the infield, or say they lose Machado, he becomes more of a third base prospect. But for the sake of this pod and what BA has to say, and I trust BA as well, let's put him at second for now.
And I think so if I were looking for proximity and a proximity player to put at one, Mead would have been the option, but because of the positionality and because he doesn't have the range and athleticism of a Merrill, right? Merrill does have that scouted athleticism as a defender. That's why I chose to put him there and Mead at 3.
Got it.
So I'm confident with that. This whole list is different, and I think then maybe we'll see in future years because of that, right? Because I think teams are gonna start looking for the athletic second baseman with range, because you can't just throw a Max Muncy there anymore.
Right.
So I think this list will be very different next year. In fact, even with speed, right? I grew up associating speed with second base. And on my list, I only have 260 speeds on here. And one of them is, I do have another transfer from third base because of the Dodgers announcement. I have Vargas on here as well.
Sure.
And Vargas is at 60 speed. So yeah, I think the need for athleticism again will rise at second base.
I agree with that. So the knock on Jackson Merrill basically is that he hits the ball on the ground too much.
Yes.
What everyone has said is he hits the ball hard. He's a very, very good hitter, great hand-eye coordination, great athlete. He's listed at 6'3", 195 currently. Everything is there for him to be an outstanding hitter. But again, as I said, everything is on the ground. Last year, between complex ball and A ball, he was in the kind of the mid-50s ground ball rate, as far as I can see. Previous year, he was 59% in complex ball. So you're talking about a guy who is still figuring out how to elevate. I do think that we've seen a lot of organizations are able to teach that, and minus Cabrian Hayes, but I think that's something that if you're taking a 19-year-old kid who's got everything else except for the ability to elevate, it's a good bet, I think, on him learning that. He also, despite the inability to do that, he still showed out in A-ball last year, and I love him. I know that he has a lot of helium. I know a lot of people are talking about by midseason he could be a top 10 prospect. There's been even chatter that he could go as high as 1 if he doesn't figure that out because of the other tools.
Yeah, and part of that filter is filtering him out versus kind of the hype players. Like we all joke about, James Anderson being, putting those hype players up pretty quickly, right? Sure. To me, is what you just mentioned, the determiner, kind of the filter from the Anderson hype thing is getting feedback from scouts and front offices that BA and BP get, right? So you have some front offices saying just what you said, that they wouldn't be shocked at all if he's in the top 10 by mid year, and some were even placing him in the top 5.
All right. So that's your one.
So talk about your guy. In some ways I didn't prepare as much details because I knew you were going to give them all here.
For Termarr?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Again, admittedly, he's my guy. He's drafted number 4 overall last year by the Pittsburgh Pirates, signed above slot for $7.2 million. He's listed on Pipeline as 5'7", 175, which obviously is very short for a Major League Baseball player. I would guess he's probably closer to 190 at this point in time. I've watched a ton of film on him since last year. I did draft him in our hybrid keeper league last year. I do have him in one of our leagues. I see 70 hit, 60 power, and I think the 70 hit is conservative, if I'm being honest. I also think that the 60 power is conservative. I don't think there's any risk in him being below a 60 power. And I rank him this high, both on my overall, my first rank, I think I had him 7th overall. And I know that's aggressive for an FYPD player. I just think he's a generational talent. So I have 70 hit, 60 power, 50 speed, and 65 discipline. I think he has the ability to be a 70 discipline if he was to take more pitches, but his hand-eye coordination is so good that I just don't see him walking nearly as much as a player could with his eye. I think he's up there to hit. I see the potential as 300, 400, 500 with 30 home runs and 10 steals at second base in his prime. And I think 35 home runs is not out of the question for him. One player that he brings to mind, interestingly, maybe just because he's short, is Dustin Pedroia. We used to see Pedroia. You would look at him and there's no way in hell he was hitting a home run, right? He's so small. But he had put up some huge years. And I think Termarr has more power than that. If you watch his swing, he has a really compact stance. He keeps the bat pretty level to the ground. He's got a big leg kick that the bottom of his foot comes almost to the bottom of his kneecap. And the bat becomes perpendicular to the ground, like facing straight up as he strides, and his elbow is pretty cocked. So it's a kind of interesting swing, right? It's not a prototypical swing, but as most scouts have said, nobody cares that it's weird because he has such elite bat to ball and because he hits with such incredible power. There were times where I saw him come out of his shoes and fall, trying to hit for power. And, I think that as time goes on, as he gets stronger, especially in his upper body, because all of his weight's in his thighs. So that's one thing I should mention. I saw James Anderson commented on Termarr and said he has a bad body. And I don't know what he's looking at, right? He's looking at a guy who he's probably, because his thighs are so thick, that's what he sees as a bad body. Come on, man. The dude's hitting the ball 450 fucking feet. And he's 18 years old. That's not a bad body. That's power in his midsection and in his thighs. And his legs are what are driving him to that 60 power right now. And as he fills out up top, he's going to become much better at staying under control with his swing. So I don't know what the fuck he's looking at. Pissed me off to see that. Like I believe in Termarr that much. Some of the other things I saw in his film is he's driving the ball with ease to left field. And currently he's flying out warning track. He's flying out to left. Anything that's high and outside, fastballs, kind of middle to upper, he's driving 300 and some feet to left field. And he's 18. So you put on another 10 pounds, you give him a little more experience in the minor leagues, those balls can go out, right? Those balls are hitting the fence. Those balls are going out. And then I saw him hit a double off of Bailey Ober to right center. So, it's major league pitcher on a 92 mile an hour fastball. So he's 18. He's hitting doubles pulling doubles to right center off of a legit major league starter. He sees the ball great out of the pitcher's hand. I don't know what to say, man. Like, he's not going to run a ton. Elite baseball IQ, which I think that plus not being totally slow, is going to allow for double-digit steals, at least as a youth. And a guy who they're calling the Black Wade Boggs, right? When he was coming out of high school. To me, he's a can't miss. I will be incredibly surprised if he doesn't become a superstar. I also think he went fourth in the draft just because he was a second baseman, you know, and from an offensive standpoint, from a hitting standpoint, I think he was the consensus best bat, both average and, you know, not power compared to a Spencer Jones, but power compared to anyone else in his middle infield sort of range. So I'd go get him. I think that he's the cornerstone of a contending Pirates team in 2026 with O'Neal Cruz. I think he is a potential batting champion who hits for power. And the reason why you don't see him elevated completely on some of these prospect boards is they're talking about the player overall, and he doesn't have the defensive position to make him a number one prospect. But then you talk about his bat, there's nobody else out there with 70 hit and 60 power. I don't know. He's obviously, like, I'm gushing, but he is my favorite, probably my favorite player in baseball outside of Julio Rodriguez now. And I think he's going to be a superstar. Is there any way that you see him not becoming a very, very good major leaguer?
No, I think he's a high floor as well. High ceiling, high floor player. I just want to see more. But I have him, you know, there is another 70-60, I would argue, in Mead, but I would have Termarr based upon pre and that's not unrealistic. That's exactly where BA has him, right? Scouts have him.
Sure.
But anyway, I would based upon his potential, I put Johnson at 75 hit. Because some scouts were having him at 80 coming out of the draft. So,
right. Like I said, for me, the 70-60 was conservative. I think that I think that he may prove to be a 75 or an 80 hit. And I also think he could hit 35 home runs, which would put his power closer to a 65 or a 70.
He had by the way, this was limited at bats, but right. He had the highest walk rate out of any of mine. I have 11 on here because there's a tie at 10. Out of all 11, he had the highest walk rate, 21%.
One other, so I should say too, I put my head down with the 70-60 comparison to Mead, but it was the same as, you know, I was talking to Aaron on the other pod about Gunnar Henderson and Miguel Vargas both being a 60 power or 60 hit 60 power to me. But they're different. There's a difference in their 60 hit 60 power, right? I think Gunnar is 60 with the potential for more. That's a pretty conservative estimate, whereas I don't see Vargas as having anything above a 60 power, right? They both might be 60 speed, but I think Gunnar steals more bags, even if Vargas is the faster runner. I think the same thing applies to Termarr and Mead. It's not saying Mead can't be I have him down as, you know, a 325 home run season not being out of the question for Curtis Mead. He's my number 3 second baseman. I love him. I think he's great. I just think Termarr's better. They could both have 70-60. I think Termarr's just a better player.
I'm not going to debate that because I have Mead as 3 and Termarr as 2.
The one last thing with Termarr that I love is, and this doesn't impact our dynasty ratings, but he's the leader, right? He's the guy. He walks in the room and he is the guy. And you listen to any interview with him, you talk to any scout who's interacted with him, any executive that's interacted with him, and they all say he's like the president, right? He's the man. And that, for me, there's a special place for me seeing an African-American player in American baseball carry themselves that way and be seen as that, because it's something that I grew up with in the 80s, but we don't see as much anymore. And I think it's super cool. But that doesn't impact where I rate him, obviously, but I don't know. I see a star in him.
Yeah, it's funny that I saw a Ford interview. and they were asking him who's the biggest shit talker and kind of the personality of the young crop coming up, and
He said
Johnson
Termarr.
was yeah.
I love it. Right on. So yeah, that's Termarr Johnson. He's my number one. Like I said, he's my top 10 overall. I do think, or I am admittedly out in front as far as rating FYPD players or younger players higher without the history of the track record. But I also think that, if we're talking about gameplay and dynasty baseball, in order to acquire these players, at least without paying, full freight or paying the premium for them, you have to do some scouting and take some chances on players like this, right? And I don't do this with anybody, but I think when I find a player who I think is more talented, I'm not ranking Connor Norby over Termarr Johnson. I like Norby, but they're not the same player. They're not even close to the same player. And if I'm wrong sometimes on those young players, so be it. I just think he's more talented. All right, so your 2 is Johnson. Your 3 is Curtis Mead. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
All
so
right.
your 2.
My 2 is Michael Busch. I'm still a believer. 25 years old. Do you want to talk about Busch or Mead?
We'll talk about Busch first, and then
okay. 25 years old, Los Angeles Dodgers prospect, drafted 31st in the first round by the Dodgers in 19, signed for $2.3 million, 6'1", 210, left-handed bat. Questions about whether he's going to be able to stick at second. He's pretty slow and a pretty thick dude. But last year, between AA and AAA, triple slash of 274, 365, 516. 552 at-bats, 118 runs, 32 homers, and 108 RBIs. He walked 11.5% of the time and K'd 26% of the time. There's thunder in Michael Busch's bat. I don't know. I'm starting to wonder. So we just learned that Miguel Vargas is probably going to start the season at second base for the Dodgers and Max Muncy at third.
That was weird. The GM didn't even mention Busch in that.
I wonder if it's something that they see. Is it something that they see in Busch that they think he's going to be vulnerable to major league pitching, or if the plan is to potentially trade one of those guys pretty soon? Because those stats, plus you go watch film on Busch, there is some swing and miss. The 26% K rate is not particularly great, but he doesn't have super platoon splits. Like, he doesn't get killed by lefties. And he hits for a ton of power. I think that Busch is, again, he's a 20 to 25 home run and 800 plus OPS player up the middle. And that's incredibly valuable, right? I do think that they're going to have to make a move with him somehow. They're either going to have to trade him or open up second base. I said on the third base pod with Aaron that if it's me, if I'm running the Dodgers, I can still use Max Muncy, but he's my utility guy, right? I'm putting Vargas at third. I'm putting Busch at second. I'm having Muncy spell both of those guys, potentially play some first base and DH. And I want to see what I have. They produce way too much in the minor leagues to not at least give them a half a season to prove whether they are the hitters that they were in the minors. Is there anything in Busch, or what led you to not rate Busch in your top 4?
Well, I have Busch at 5.
Okay.
And on the positives, so out of my 11, there's 3 players with 60 power, and he's one of them. So you got Termarr, Mead, and then Busch. I rostered Busch a lot last year, so I watched a lot of his bats in the minors. The K rate wasn't too concerning to me because he works counts like crazy. So so I think part of that's the result of that. And he hits the ball hard. He hits it harder than Vargas, right? He's closer to 35 hard hit. Vargas is anywhere between 30 and 32. And I think Vargas went down a bit last year with hard hit. And Vargas's transition to becoming kind of that top prospect was he started to elevate the ball more,
right?
And I think that took a little bit of he was hitting a lot of fly balls, took a little bit of the from from how hard he hits it. But Bush, yeah, he kills the ball, and kills the ball to all fields too. So why I have him at 5 is just I snuck Vargas in this list because of what the Dodgers said. So so if I were more sure that he would be a starting second baseman for a team, I could see him being as in that top 5 very easily.
I do wonder. I just took your boy Luis Morales.
Oh yeah,
was my pick.
Good. I hope we hurry because I'm gonna try to draft one of the second basemen that's on my list.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
So don't post this until we
right. That's funny. Yeah, Bush, to me, it's just the question is really playing time. I think that even if he does move to, there is some risk in him moving to first base because he's stiff enough at second. Even if that happens, I think he's still valuable, right? He becomes a kind of middle of the road, kind of lower tier starting first baseman in dynasty at that point, but he's still valuable. And so if you can roster him somehow, I would. I think the chances of him being a Dodger are probably 50-50. I do think that he's probably their top candidate to be dealt for something to help them this year. I'd love to see him stay there, but he's too good of a bat to not allow to play in the majors at some point this year. Like I said, he's my number 2. I have Mead at 3. Maybe we should take a quick break and come back and we can talk about Mead, because I know you'll be 85% of how I wax poetic about Termarr with your beloved Curtis Mead. Let's take a quick break.
All right.
All right, man. Curtis Mead, your boy.
All right. Curtis Mead. So Curtis Mead was acquired from Philadelphia in 2019 by Tampa Bay as a prospect. And that always should be on somebody's notifications when that happens. And also when Tampa trades a player too. That's I think Cronenworth may be the highest of any player that they've traded, that was kind of under the radar prospect. But anyway, during COVID he went down to Australia and reworked his swing, got a lot of added a lot of EV to his swing. On a side note, this is kind of cool with Tampa. They sent 2 of their top infielders, Latin players, to Australia over winter this time. So we got Willie Vasquez, and then Caminero. Were sent down there and they raked. But awesome. But there's something about that. It'd be cool. That would almost be a great movie. Right. Having players go down to Australia and just right. But anyway, back to Curtis Mead. So I haven't heard anybody knock his hitting, right? Scouts would say he's one of the top hitters in the minors right now. He's 78 contacts, 11% walk. He had 532 slug, always over 900, in the high hundreds to 900s in OPS. Baseball America has him at 70 hits, 60 power, 40 speed. And that brings my caution as far as how often is he going to stick at second. He also had elbow surgery over the winter, and he was shut down early last year. So that brings question to the third base eligibility. They would probably move him closer to first as second baseman. What is intriguing about that, though, is just the way Tampa, and there's pros and cons here, but for the pro first, Tampa moves players around a lot, so he can get multiple eligibility. BA does list him as DH in 2025. They actually have your favorite and Aaron's favorite Wander moving to second, and Williams coming up at shortstop. So he may not even be long term at second. So that's the con. As far as swing goes, very compact. He's ready to roll. And because of that, Scout said his swing is very adjustable to really anything. They have no problem as far as how he's going to adjust to MLB pitching. The question is ETA. It just depends on what Tampa's going to do. They're loaded right now. In the infield, can he earn his way on if he has a hot spring? I think so. And it depends on how the others do. Are they going to still trade some of them? What's going to happen to Brujan as well? Is he going to be strictly outfield? What are they going to do with him?
I've come all the way around with Mead. He's my number 3. He would be 2 if he was in a different organization. Because of the playing time issues that you brought up. He's also, so Brandon Lau is signed through 2024 with 2 club options in 25 and 26. And his AAV through 24 is $4 million, right? Mm-hmm. So $4 million a year for a player with Brandon Lau's, history of hitting 39 home runs a couple years ago it's hard to envision him breaking in at second unless the Rays decided to deal Lau for something. His swing is gorgeous, right? There's like barely a toe tap. Barely, 1 second here. There's barely a toe tap. And I think that's what everybody loves, right? It's short. There's no noise in his swing at all. I think, like, as you said, his ability to adjust to velocity versus adjust to breaking stuff it's right now, honestly, it's kind of second to none in the minor leagues. I love his swing. I asked the question, he's got a bad arm and he's 6'2". He's not very fast. So if he plays second, he's playing a below average second in all likelihood, right? The Rays are very good at positioning their defense. I think they're going to try to keep him there as much as possible. It is too bad that he can't play third because I think that would be the perfect spot for him on this team. Being a second baseman, you've got Brandon Lau, and as you stated, Vidal Brujan. You also have Cal Manzardo at first, right? Mm-hmm. So I would assume that the way that the Rays have been up to this point, that he plays some first base, plays some second base, DHs some, and then they figure out the rest later. But as far as like Curtis Mead playing a big role in 2023, I think you're right. He has to come out and hit 400 in spring training to make that happen. Otherwise, I see them keeping him down for another couple of months, at least couple of months, and coming up. But dynamite hitter. As I said earlier, I don't quite see the same ceiling for him as I see for Termarr. Very different players. I think Termarr is more explosive, but I do think that the floor for Mead as a hitter is very good, and that's what we gauge in Dynasty. So the real question is where and how much does he play in the beginning? Mm-hmm. But I'm a believer in his bat. I think he's got a like I said, I love that quiet swing. I'm looking for that in players without, because the more, I guess I should explain, the more noise there is, the more bat waggle, the bigger the leg kick, the more weirdness with the back elbow, the more likely it is that that there's going to be something, that a hiccup that inhibits the swing and creates more of a drought or a slump, right? Where they're trying to fix the swing. When you have a swing as simple as Mead, it's a very easy adjustment to get back to where you need to be. And I think that's the attraction for him. But yeah, I'm with you. I love him. I don't know if it's a 70 hit. I would put the hit closer at 60, 65, but I can see why it's 70 from some people. All right, who's next for you?
At 4, I have, and this is who I placed in here, Miguel Vargas, based on the news we received from Los Angeles's GM that he will be their starting second baseman for 2023. I did trade him last year in order to get Robert. I thought it was a trade high. I still don't regret it, even though he's moving to second base, because I ultimately if I could get the genealogy of my trades right, I think it went, I got Robert, and then moved Robert for Marte, who, if I was on the other pod, I would play up his metrics, I think, and his health really was a downturn, but I could see him turning it around, and Arizona's really confident in that this year. And then I got Vinny P ultimately from that trade. So anyway, so Vargas, I still love Vargas. I traced him all last year. I do like that that BA got his speed right, I think. It was funny, I watched his first major league at bat, I believe it was a triple. And all the announcers were shocked at how fast he was. And I think anybody who watched him at minor said, no way. And then he later in the same game got a steal, right? In his first game. So I could see him having that sneaky speed. Probably not like as you mentioned before, some of the other ones coming up, but he could have 15, 20 steals in his best year, especially his younger years. I put him at 65 hit. I think that's where most have him. Some may have him at 70. My concern for him is the power. I think as we talked about, so we were talking about this before in the break. He elevated his swing. Dodgers did well in tapping into that, but I think in doing that, I think he lost some of the hard hit. Like his hard hit is not as high as some of these other players, these elites with a high hit. So, and even BA has him at 50 power. So that's where I would have questions there. His walk is a little low too, so his contact's great, over 80%. That's elite for minors. 7% walk though, so I think he's a good enough hitter, good enough player to see that elevate based upon experience. But his slug side of his OPS was a little concerning last year too. It was just at 432. So I could see him as a 20 home run, 15, 20 steal, 290 second baseman in the future. Very high floor, but I'm not a ceiling guy with Vargas.
I'm on board with that. I think I have his hit as 60 and his power as 60. And part of the power projection is that I trust the Dodgers to teach him, right? If he's hitting the ball hard, I trust that organization in being able to get them maximize the power out of darn near any player that they have. They have that track record, right? Teaching elevation specifically to right-handed hitters, teaching how to elevate, hit the ball out down the line and left. So I think he's a smart enough and a coordinated enough hitter that I think he'll learn how to do that with selective pitches, right? But I agree. The reason why I will continue to rank him as a third baseman because I think when I look at the Dodgers depth chart, that's where I see him ending up. Especially if he fills out a little more. I think he's a third baseman in the future. But I don't see the explosiveness or the quick twitch that I want from an absolute elite prospect. I compared him on the third base pod to Gunnar, right? To Gunnar Henderson. And I think Gunnar Henderson is a better overall athlete and has a little bit more explosiveness. And I think, when you measure those two against each other and you look at kind of top end potential, Gunnar Henderson has potential for more homers and more steals. I think just because he's a little bit more explosive of an athlete, if all things are equal. And the name of the game in fantasy really is power and speed, right? And so if we're looking for home runs and we're looking for OPS and we're looking for stolen bases, I will err on the side of Gunnar. And so if we're considering Vargas as a second baseman, I would probably put him, I'd probably put him right there with Mead and I think Mead, Bush, and Vargas would be in the same bucket for me, in the same tier, and then there would be a cutoff to the next tier. I think Vargas is very safe, right? Very, very, very safe. He's 23 years old. We have, let's see, how many years of data on him. So he was in rookie ball in 18. He was in A ball in 18, A ball and high A in 19. In 21, he was in high A and double A. Last year, he's in triple A. So we literally have 4 years of data plus a COVID year in 20 on Miguel Vargas. It's not that difficult to predict that he's going to be a decent hitter. I don't see the upside that some others do. I don't care that he's a 94th percentile speed guy. That doesn't mean that he's going to steal a ton of bags, right? There are plenty of players who are 50th percentile but steal 25 bases because they understand how to steal bases. I think speed is only one component of it. Not to say he can't get there. That doesn't mean that much to me at this point. It's a little surprising more than anything. But Vargas he's a very good prospect. I would love to have him on my team. But he doesn't have the upside that Mead does, and he doesn't have the upside that Termarr does for me. In fact, he doesn't have the upside of Bush, the power upside of Michael Bush. And I think Bush stays at second and Vargas stays at third. Enough on Vargas from me. That's not to say I'm cool on him. I just think he's safe. And I tend to gravitate towards more elite upside, even if it means that they flame out. My number 4 is Connor Norby. Where do you have Norby?
I have Norby at 7.
Okay. This is so we're now in what I would consider a little bit more, not boring, but players where there's quite a bit of safety and not quite the same upside as say a Bush or a Mead or certainly Termarr. Connor Norby is a second baseman, potentially left fielder for the Baltimore Orioles. He's 23 years old. He was drafted in the second round, 41st overall by the Orioles in 2021. 5'10", 187. He's got that fire plug build. Again, another second baseman with a quiet stance and a quick bat, short stride. I think we see a bit of a thread or a common theme with a lot of these second basemen who are shorter, quick hands, pretty powerful player. I see a lower ceiling with him. I know he put up 29 home runs last year. I see him as your kind of typical 15 to 20 home run, 5 to 10 steal second baseman who is kind of a bottom end second baseman on a championship fantasy team, right? If you have Connor Norby, you're going to have some elite players at other positions because I think he's going to give you the bare minimum of what you need to win a championship. That said, I don't think he's a bad player. The one question I have with him is playing time again. Same theme as a lot of the other players. He's competing with Jordan Westberg at second base for time. I don't think he plays anywhere else on the infield. If he becomes an outfielder for fantasy purposes, then he is another kind of run-of-the-mill guy, right? Maybe in a great year, he's an OF3, but you're looking more at OF4 with Connor Norby. So again, he's my number 4. Part of the being number 4 is the safety of him. I think he's got a higher floor but a lower ceiling. How about you?
Yeah, so I had him at 55 hits, 55 power, and 50 speed. And I like how he does have that typical second baseman spark plug, 5'10", 187. I like how he brought it on at the end of the year. So his splits were showing, upward, very high upward trend. And I think that's why he got on hype list at the end of last year. So 79% hits, contact, 10% walk, hits it hard, 521 OPS. Slug side of OPS. And yeah, so the question again with him is, where is he going to end up? It seems like Baltimore has a lot of these floor players, including Cowser in the outfield, right? That will do decent, but they're not these ceiling guys that are going to blow you away with that potential.
Right.
And also the question I would have with Norby, I think you've brought this up in the past, is where's he going to hit in that lineup, right? And that's the issue. Even if I were to put Peraza on this list, I love Peraza a lot, but where's he? Still a 9-hitter in the Yankees lineup is going to be nice, just like Bryson Stott's going to be nice at number 9 in Philadelphia. But there's not a huge upside there as far as ever seeing him be at the top of a lineup, and that's going to hurt you in counting stats.
Right. I failed to mention Joey Ortiz as well as a middle infielder who's got, he's got skill.
Yeah, and he made pipeline this year, right? He's at the end of the pipeline list.
So yeah, even I think you're right. Norby, if Norby hits for some power like we think he will, he's still probably either a two-hitter. Two-hitter is like your best case scenario for Norby, but you could see him hitting 6th or 7th and producing a decent, decent average and decent number of home runs, but he's still going to hit 6 or 7, which, as we know, cuts down on your runs and RBIs and really does kind of deflate some of that fantasy value. That said, I think he's a decent player. I would elevate him a bit if the fences were still in the same place in Baltimore. I think that's another interesting component, is he is a bit of a power player. At least that's what you're looking for from him. And does his power get suppressed by playing in Baltimore because of that left field fence that they moved out last year? So Norby was my 4. You given your 4 already, correct? Who do you have 5?
Bush is my 5.
Bush is 5. Okay, so I've got Oswald Peraza at 5. New York Yankees prospect, middle infield. So I should say before I go into Peraza that I ranked him at short. A lot of people have Peraza as the Yankee shortstop and Volpe moving to second. There's been some talk about Volpe going to third. I don't think I think his arm is too short for third, to be honest. But Peraza is I think it's pretty easy to say that he's the better defender than compared to Volpe, but I think there is something to be said for Anthony Volpe's personality. Like, yes, I'm guessing here, but his personality, his charisma, his growing up near New York and New Jersey, the hype that he's gotten, the idea that Volpe is the next face of the Yankees after Judge.
Yeah, and he's Jeter too, right?
He is, right? And that's what I was getting to. And so if he's your shortstop, then there's something about, I think the value of him being a shortstop versus a second baseman and that transition from Jeter to Volpe. So because Peraza doesn't have the same offensive upside, and he's not an elite player potentially, I think that they will be inclined to keep Volpe at short and Peraza at second, as long as they can. Again, that's a guess. I'm not a Yankees fan. I don't read every Yankees blog, but that's my inclination. From a pure baseball standpoint, I would move Volpe to second and put Peraza at short. That's just me. Anyways, if Peraza stays at second, I really like him at number 5. He's athletic. He's more explosive than Volpe as an athlete. He doesn't take a ton of walks, so I wonder about the selectivity there. I tend to stay away from players that don't walk a decent amount in the minor leagues because I think that number always comes down in the majors. We've talked a bit about how players with high walk rates can get, if they can't do damage on strikes or with strikes, major league pitchers will pump strikes to them knowing that they're not going to get hurt. If you already don't walk a ton, again, I think that's a bit of a red flag for me. In AAA last year, his walk rate was 7.9% and his K rate was 23.3%. That said, he had 19 home runs and 33 steals. And if we get back to, what I said a little while ago, the name of the game is home runs and steals, basically, right? Without having a average that tanks out. So Peraza for me is like a 55 hit, 55 power.
Where do you have him on run, on speed?
55 to 60.
Okay.
I think he's 6 feet, 200 pounds. That's what he's listed at. And he's 22. I think realistically expect him to put on a tiny bit more weight as he gets older. And if that's the case, if he's 6 feet 210, do you really see a 60 run at that point in time? I don't know if I do. And I don't know if the Yankees will give him the green light to run a ton, given what that park, the dimensions of that park and some of the power on that team. So I like Peraza a lot. I do think he's a trade candidate moving forward for them. I think he would fetch a decent return. Interestingly, he was signed on June 2nd, 2016 by the Yankees for $175,000.
Wow.
So quite the return on their investment, but good tools across the board, very good defender. You're seeing 55s across the board with maybe a 60 run. Good player. I think he will produce double-digit home runs and double-digit steals for quite a few years. Not super exciting to me, but worth having on your team. You don't have him ranked, I assume?
No, I had him at shortstop.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll cover him in a couple of episodes. Who do you have at 6 next for you, right?
Yes, yes. So I'm smiling because I don't know how to deal with his name. He's from Canada, so and French province. So I'm not sure if I do the Spanish, Julian, right?
I don't know.
Julian.
Edward Julian. You can say Edward Julian
Julian.
as far as I'm concerned. I'm not French.
I think how he spells his first name is more French, right? Edouard.
It is.
So but anyway, I like him a lot. He's he was a riser this past year for the Twins. 6'2", 195. With that build, there is questions as far as speed. So he's at 45 speed, but decent fielding at second. I think there is room for him now that the Twins made that trade for Lopez, right? So he's 19% walk rate, which I really like at the minors level. 75% contact. He hits it hard too, 33% hard hit. There's been some high numbers with his EVs, 491 slug. A lot of them have him at 60 hits, 50 power. I think the power could go as high as 55. He's not gonna be a home run monster at second, but he will get a lot of doubles and gap to gap and some homers there. He's just another one of these high floor second basemen coming up. So I like getting, like what you were saying, I like getting to this part, because when we got to first base, it was like, oh shit, right? And but here it's like, oh, there's some really cool, solid floor players here,
right?
That will be fun to track in the next couple of years.
Right. I love him. He's very, we've talked a lot about OBP on both pods over the last couple of months. I love the fact that he has such a selective eye. It does hurt him at times taking strikes because he is so selective. It's hurt his K rate a bit too. His K rate last year was 24.6% in AA. They say that that's less about swing and miss and more about his selectivity. He's a super interesting hitter. I have him as 60 hit, 55 power. I did not give discipline grades, but I would put his discipline probably at a 65 with the upside to get to 70 if he's able to swing at more strikes and take fewer strikes. I do worry about his playing time, right? So Polanco is signed through 23, I think, with club options for 24 and 25. And he is primarily a second baseman at this point. He's not playing short with Correa there. He's still roster. Jose Miranda is going to play somewhere, right? Currently it's third, but it could be second. And then I have Julian as moving to first base, maybe, right? He is slow. And if he does move to first, the Twins have Kirilloff, there's Gallo. He has to show that he's a little better hitter than the rest of those guys to get the plate appearances that we would need for him to be an effective fantasy player. But I think the skills are there. And he's one that I think if you ask me who I was going to really target or keep an eye on out of this bunch, below Mead, Bush, Vargas, Termarr, it would probably be Julian over Peraza and Norby. I just think he's more interesting, and I do think there might be slightly more upside potential. One thing with him too is when coming out of Auburn, he was seen as a kind of almost a 3 true outcome guy, right? He was trying to hit for a shit ton of power. And I think the Twins have really helped him become a better hitter. So if he becomes a better hitter and is able to add some of that power back, now you're talking about a really outstanding hitter at second base. I do think there's 20 to 25 home run potential with a really high OBP. I don't know that he'll reach that, but I think that potential is there. All right, so he's my 6. He was where for you?
He's my 6 as well.
Okay. And who do you have at 7?
Norby was my 7.
Okay. I have, let's see, Norby, Peraza, Julian. I have Zach Geloff at 7. Is he on your list?
He's not on my list, no.
Okay, so Geloff was a second-round pick of Oakland in 2021, 60th overall, 6'3", 205, came up more as a third baseman. He's drafted out of Virginia. I have him as kind of a 55 hit, 55 power, 55 run. I don't think he's got star potential. His last year in AA and AAA, he had let's see here, 18 home runs in 389 at bats, 10 steals as well, triple slash of 270, 352, 815. Real quickly, I like some of the raw power. Much of why I have him ranked here is opportunity. I think that prospects in the Oakland organization are going to get as long of a leash as you could ever want, right? And so for Geloff, I think he's going to be their starting second baseman this season. And so if you've got someone who's got an average to slightly above average hit tool, average to slightly above average raw, and average to slightly above average speed, who's going to accumulate, say, 500 plate appearances next season, it's worth a shot having him on your roster to see if he does become a decent player. I think his, again, I don't think his upside is that high, but when you're getting to this area of the rankings, you have to start looking at opportunity. And so Geloff for me is a player with some talent and a pretty long runway to see if he's going to be able to reach his potential.
Yeah, I can see he's the prototypical A's second baseman ever since I've been, when he was born, they probably put him in like a he's second baseman uniform, right? Just fits that profile across the board, not anything that stands out, but solid across the board.
Right. I don't think if I had Geloff, I do in one or two of our, I think one of our leagues. For me, he's, I want to wait and see what he does this year, the first half of this year. I think he's worth having at the end of your kind of minors bench to see if he does produce. And if he does, he's potentially, you can trade him as a starting second baseman for something of real value. So as an asset, I think he is somebody who I would want to acquire. I don't know that I want him as my starting second baseman in fantasy, or if he's going to help me win a championship necessarily. But good bat, again, kind of that 55s across the board sort of player that's not going to kill you. So he was my number 7. 8.
And I have this above their top prospects. This is Detroit. And to be completely forthright and honest, I didn't know this player until I read MLB Pipeline, but then I looked into him. So it's Wenceel Perez for Detroit. 5'11", fits a second baseman profile, 5'11", 203. He kind of fits the definition of a pop-up prospect. But there's weird stuff going on in Detroit. They get these players that are top prospects that you wonder how well taught they were coming through, right? Sure. And then they have these prospects that just all of a sudden break out. So Carpenter is the big,
Mhm.
big one last year. And what I heard about Carpenter too is, and this doesn't speak well of Detroit last year, he went outside of the org to help him with his batting, right?
It's horrible.
Yeah, yeah. But look at the results, right?
Right.
I think early on, JD Martinez did the same.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it was with Houston, or I think it was with Houston. Then he went to Detroit, but he got outside help too, and I'm
Mhm.
just completely turned around his game. But anyway, I'm not. I haven't looked in far enough to know if Perez did the same. But I
Mhm.
like that he fits a second baseman profile, and I was kind of embarrassed because there was no, outside of Vargas, there was no 60 speed at second base. So
Right.
so I liked it. I love his speed. BA has him conservatively at a 60. He had 18 steals last year. He fits the bar with contact, 85% contact,
Mhm.
10% walk rate. His hard hit is low, 26. He's kind of like a Yuri, not a Yuri, a Steury Ruiz type, with a lower hard hit. But he did have the 531 slug and
Mhm.
898 OPS. And I can see him moving through. He'll have the opportunity before Jace Young, who
Mhm.
I have at 10B.
Right. I don't have him in my top 10, Wencio Perez. I do have him just outside with Justin Foscue. I think you're right. He's going to play, he's going to have an opportunity, right? And so that should be worth something. Um, I'm pulling up the organizational depth chart for Detroit right now. Let's see, middle infield. I don't see a whole lot in the middle infield that's going to really threaten um Wencio Perez. They did sign Cesar Hernandez to as a non-roster invitee, and I think that might be the spot that Perez is competing for. I didn't like seeing that. They also have Andy Ibanez in the same. Um, but when you look at the middle infield, there's just not a whole lot that should threaten him until Jace Young.
I think they put him on the 40 man, right?
Mm-hmm. And he's a switch hitter. He hits right-handers better, which is what you want.
Mm-hmm.
But he has enough hit and enough athletic skill or athletic ability to keep an eye on. If he opens up as the starting second baseman for Detroit, he'd have to beat out Jonathan Scope, but I don't think I would be totally surprised if he did, since they're starting Nick Maton at third base as of right now. They could move one of those guys to third. Interesting prospect, kind of fun. I appreciate that you put him in the top 10. I did not have incredible knowledge of him until until we read Pipeline either. I knew who he was. I did not think of ranking him up to that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. My 8 is Luis.
We're at less than a minute here.
Oh, we are. You're right. Let's take a quick break. We'll come right back.
All right.
All right. My number 8, Luis Angel Acuna. Do you have him on your list?
No, I don't, but it's mainly has to do with positionality. Like I kind of group him in I see him good enough to
Stay at
to
short.
yeah, to put somewhere. He could be super utility, but even outfield, he's good enough that they're gonna find a spot for him.
Mm-hmm. So he's 20 years old, right-handed hitter, signed July 2nd, 2018 by Texas. $425,000 out of Venezuela. He is the younger brother of Ronald Acuna Jr. Luis Angel Acuna is seen as kind of a middle infield prospect as of right now. Again, another 55 grade across the board type of player, 55 hit power and speed. Last year he hit 277, 369, 795 in high A and double A ball, 11 homers and 40 stolen bases. I think the 40 steals are a bit fool's gold. But you really can't. So being the brother of Ronald Acuna Jr., I think was both a blessing and a curse. because one of the knocks on Acuna is he really is trying to hit the ball out to left field all the time, right? He's got a swing that's geared for power, even though he's listed at 5'10". But he also has some of that ability to actually do it. So I don't know what he becomes. I think from my personal preference, scouting players, I wish he tried harder to just get on base and not hit so many home runs. I think he would be a more effective player if he did. His hit tool might grade out as a 60 if he wasn't trying to hit for so much power. But I really like him as a player for fantasy purposes. And I have his risk as high, in part because you don't see big power, right-handed big power players like this without a 60 grade power tool become successful second basemen. But I also wonder, where the hell is he going to play? Right? Yeah. They signed Simeon and Seager to be their middle infield for the next 8 years. Like, where does Acuna play for them? And if he is a utility player, does he get enough at bats to be fantasy relevant? So I think you may see him become a part of a trade at some point in time, especially if they're in contention. But I like him as a prospect quite a bit. I like him better than Jace Young. I like him better than Nick York. I like him better than Justin Foscue. I just think he's a more talented player. Any comment on Acuna? Do you want to save it for shortstop?
I like the speed. What else was I going to say about him? Yeah, he's one of those, just as Peraza was overshadowed because of org stuff by Volpe. I think he's overshadowed by his brother, right? Yeah, he's at 55 speed, but he does have the instincts there, and he's one of these players that will benefit from the new rules.
Agreed.
So, and their outfield is weak, right? So I could see him heading out there. They have Harris, Carter, Zavala coming up. Zavala had surgery in the winter, but I could see him in that mix out there. I'm not sure how much longer they're going to give Tavares.
Yeah. Well, Tavares is a very, very good defensive center fielder. And I think that, as we've seen with most teams, if he can continue to be that good in center, he doesn't have to hit much for them to value him. We'll see. Again, I'm ranking pretty much based on talent, but he is blocked as of right now. But he's my number 8. Next for you.
Yeah, so I'm staying in Texas. This is another 40 speed at second, and we have the same problem, right? So this is Justin Foscue. Why I have him here, let me pull up my stuff. He does have he was, when he came out of Mississippi State, under slot, first round pick. Had pop and power, and there are questions about can contact, and I like what he's done in trying to improve the hit. So when he first came up, he was 45 hit, but last year, if I got this right, he was 86% contact, 10% walk. But what's weird is his hard hit was all the way down to 24, right? So you see him very much shifting the power to hit here, but that's quite impressive. I like that he shows the talent to be able to meet his critics. His slug was 489, OPS 859. But where the hell does he go, right? Right. So Acuna, he has the speed to help, right? And he has the athleticism to help. Foscue does not. So is he one of these trade guys, right? Texas is aiming to contend, right? Unfortunately, they have the Mariners to deal with, right? So hopefully we overcome them. But I could see them making some trades with these youngsters coming up in order to continue to improve. The starting pitching is great. How is Young going to turn out at third base? Is Lowe going to be the same at first base as he was last year? Those are big question marks there. Are they going to get a veteran hitter to go along with Seager and Simeon? And will they use Foscue and even like the Harrises to get these hitters? Yeah, so that's where I'm at with Foscue.
It's funny because this profile is, you've got Geloff and you've got Young and you've got Nick York, who's more hit over power, but Norby, who are, they're like 55s, but then their speed is less than 55. And they're good, they're potentially good major leaguers, but I go back to this idea that if you have a position that historically has had, you get some form of stolen bases from in fantasy, and you're taking a 0 there, right? If Foscue is like 0 or 1 or 2 steals, you better hit home runs, right? You better be really good across the board at the other places, and he's not. And so, it's really, for me, it's very, very difficult to rank those players in the top 10 if they don't have any semblance of speed, even if it's 5 steals, right? Do I think Termarr is going to steal more than, in his prime, more than 5 to 7 bags? Probably not. He might steal 10 on instinct, but probably not. But if he's hitting 35 home runs, who gives a shit? Right? Same with Michael Busch, not very fast, but he's got 25 home run potential, and it's realistic. But you get to all the way down to a Foscue, and I do think he's got 20 home runs in his bat. I don't like the fact that he's trading power for hit, because you'd like to see them try to add a little bit more hit or a little bit more power and maintain the other one. Is he going to be an average or a decent, major league second baseman? I think so. I think the talent's there. But from a fantasy standpoint, with no steals, I'll pass. I'd rather take a chance on an Acuna in his same organization, because Acuna is going to also run. It's like why, when you're talking about second base in the majors, it's why Colton Wong carries value in fantasy. Right? It's why Andres Jimenez was so valuable last year. When you get both of those categories, it really does boost your team. At 9, I have Jace Young.
Okay, yeah. It's really interesting. It's really interesting that I was going to make this comment before you said that. That a lot of sites have him like at 3. And yeah, so go ahead. I'm really not close to having him that close.
So Young was the first round pick of the Detroit Tigers last year, 12th overall. Second baseman at Texas Tech, just like his brother Josh. Conference Player of the Year 2 years ago. Was in high A last year, which is they pushed him a little bit to do that. 108 at bats. He had 1 homer, 1 steal, 231, 373, 706 triple slash. Left-handed, 6', 205. He's stiff, right? Like, he's kind of he seems pretty rocked up to me when I look at him. He's not I don't think he might even add another 5 pounds. He doesn't. There's very little quick twitch with him again. He's got a nice swing. I do think that he is a decent hitter, right? There's 55 hit, 55 power. Maybe 60 power if all goes right for him. But he's a 40 run. And so we're talking about the same sort of thing as we did with Foscue, where you've got a guy who's very stationary, and he's also much lower on the developmental curve, right? Than Justin Foscue, in that he has only played in high A ball thus far. And so I have him above Foscue in part because Detroit is such a they have such a lacking in hitting prospects, and they invested a first round pick in Jace Young. So I think he's going to get an opportunity regardless of whether he performs in the minors. And I think it'll come pretty quickly given the fact that he's 22. But so one exercise that I like to do when I'm grading prospects or thinking about prospects fantasy wise is if he ends up being really good, right? If Jace Young is who we want him to be for the Tigers, what does that stat line look like? Right. And so when I look at it, I think, okay, probably like top end, Jace Young is what we thought he was. 260, 270, 25 home runs, probably a 800 plus OPS and 2 steals, 3 steals, right? Where does that put him on the major league rankings for second base? Where do you put him if that's what he achieves, right? I'm going to pull up my current second base rankings real quick and try to fit him in where I think he would be. 1 second here.
I just drafted Winslow Perez.
Nice.
During the second base pod.
I love it. So 270 let's say 270 with 25 home runs and no steals puts him probably below, right in there, like the Gleyber Torres range. Gleyber Torres had 10 steals last year, so maybe even below Gleyber Torres, below Tommy Edman, right in there with like a okay Jorge Polanco year, right? So, yes. And that's like the highest end potential. That's also assuming that Detroit's offense is actually okay by that point in time, right? Otherwise, he's 25 home runs, but he's 65 runs and 65 RBIs. So when you're looking at a prospect like a Jace Young, it's, even if he's really good, he's still not necessarily a fantasy asset. And again, for me, I would much rather take a chance on Edouard Julien, right? Or Luis Angel Acuna, who I think has a higher upside. I also just have a really, really hard time taking a 0 speed at a speed position.
He's another one that's going to be, like the second half of this, which is all hot, decent floor second baseman.
Right.
That may not win you a championship, but will fill in for you when you do need them. Right.
Right. Did you have him in your top 10?
I had him as 10B.
Ooh, you know who just went in our draft? We're doing our FYPD draft for everybody that's listening here. What's your favorite guy? Adam Frazier. Since the entire pool is available, Adam Frazier just went in the 4th round. That's ugly. No thanks. I'll pass.
Montgomery,
yeah,
he's decent. That was a decent pick after. I think the Rainiers, you, and then the guy who drafts right after me, Belieber, we keep the draft rolling.
Right. Yeah, we move pretty quickly.
Does too. There's some breaks, but part of it's, we have plenty of time. Part of it's people are working and stuff. But
right. So you said you had Young at 10B?
Yes, and I'm gonna make my argument for 10A because I ain't giving up on this guy and I still believe in him. So at 10A, I have Nick Gonzalez.
All right.
Even if we look, I know there's the K thing, but even if we look at his career minors numbers, and I tell you this is a second base prospect, and I tell you that he's 890 OPS career in the minors. A slug over 5, 384 on base percentage, 285 batting average, decent speed, 55 speed. That's somebody that I think has a little higher ceiling than some of these other guys that we're bringing up. He's also known for I don't like the term IQ because I think there's some assumptions there that
biases, sure,
yeah, especially when it comes to race, unfortunately.
Sure.
But he is linked with having this makeup, right? This IQ in the sense that he analyzes tape like crazy. He's a hard worker, kind of always undervalued, right? Until the draft where they did see him coming out of a smaller school and Pittsburgh took a risk on him. I will have a bit of forgiveness. I think they're, teams with the minors aren't going to be forthright about injuries, and I think he's been dealing with injuries the past couple of years. So I would say, there is that health thing that has affected his performance. He's never at any level besides last year when he did have the injury issues, and at the end of the year before, he's never been below 900 OPS in his life. So bad to the cons, obviously the con is a swing and miss. Even scouts, the swing and miss is there in the metrics, but scouts are saying he's having high problems with high fastballs, which you can't have if you're going to make it to the majors.
Right.
But is that something? Is his bat quick enough to work that out? Is his hand eye? And I think he has shown that his hand eye is something that he may be able to adjust to that. So I'm still on board with Nick Gonzalez, and I would have him higher if I could, but I'm just trying to remain consistent with my metrics here.
All right. So they drafted him out of New Mexico State, which was interesting in and of itself, right? To have the number 7 overall pick come out of New Mexico State.
Was that when Carrington was there? Or is that pre-Carrington?
I think Charrington was there already. I will check in a minute.
Carrington, I always mess up his name.
But I think that I love Nick Gonzalez. I want to see him succeed. I thought he was a more surefire major leaguer than when he first came out than it appears right now. It is interesting when you read off his stats in the minors, a lot of those stats sound great. And yet we downgrade him so much for that swing and miss. But coming out of a school like New Mexico State, you do wonder if it's going to take him a little longer to develop the ability to get to an elite, high 90s fastball up in the zone. There has to be some sort of adjustment to be able to do that. I also wonder at this point too, if he's a middle infielder, where does he play? I know that the assumption is that O'Neal Cruz moves at some point in time, but say Termarr is ready in 2.5 years, 2 years, and O'Neal Cruz is, even if O'Neal Cruz is in right field, right? Is Nick Gonzalez, does he have the arm to play and the range to play shortstop? We don't know. But
he could this could be make or break. He'll be up this year, so
right.
He will be that filler between him Termarr. So it's either prove it or lose it, right, for him.
Right. And because of that, I like your inclusion of him on the list. I think that the just proximity and the opportunity is worth taking a chance on someone who has talent in the bat, right? If you're asking me, and I may change my rankings, if you're asking me, would I rather have Nick Gonzalez or Jace Young going into 23? It's probably Nick Gonzalez. Nick Gonzalez or Luis Angel Acuna. I think you could debate it either way, but if my team was close to contention, I'd probably take Nick Gonzalez, right? Because there's the potential for him to help this year. And I do think from a talent standpoint, if he does shore up a little bit of the swing and miss, he elevates above Norby. He elevates above Peraza. I probably have him somewhere with Julian because I believe Julian has the power. But he's a good prospect, right? I love that we're able to still talk about him and bring him up, even though he's not in my top 10. Do you have Nick York anywhere?
No, I don't. He fell off my list. He was high on my list. I'll admit, he was one of my failures last year, but I'm not alone on that.
You had him like in your top what?
He would be in my top 5 last year.
Yeah. So Nick York, Boston Red Sox prospect, 20 years old.
You have him 10?
I do have him 10th.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I do have him 10th. Boston Red Sox prospect, drafted first round, 17th overall, out of California, 20 years old, 6 feet, 200 pounds, hit over power. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. He's already at second. He's not moving to a different position. He hasn't displayed a ton of power. People were all over him after last year because he hit 3 in A ball and high A. He hit 325 412, 928 with 14 homers and 13 steals. I don't see it. I think taking a slower hit over power young guy is a recipe for disaster, right?
Unless you think you could develop that power.
Yes, which I don't necessarily know that he can. I think that's part of why he didn't hit as well last year was he heard the critics and was trying to hit for power. And he ended up in high A with the 668 OPS. The hit tool's still there. I think with a player like York, when you have a player with the plus hit tool, a lot of times I wish they just continue to build on that strength instead of trying to turn him into a hitter that hits for more power. Let him hit for average. He is what he is, right? I maybe he's young enough that he can go back to that player that was more of a 60 hit. But to me, his value as a major leaguer would be, hitting, like I talked a little bit about Ke'Bryan Hayes. Maybe he's Ke'Bryan Hayes without the speed, which isn't a very good endorsement, but maybe he's a 300 hitter with 8 to 12 home runs, right? Which and a decent on base percentage. Maybe his on base percentage is 355 or 360. That's a pretty good second baseman. And as a right-handed hitter, maybe it's a bunch of doubles off the left field wall in Boston. But let him be what he's going to be. I have him here because he does have elite hand-eye coordination. He does have very good bat to ball. I do think his hit tool, I have him as a 55, but I think it's probably true talent's probably closer to a 60. I just don't know if he's going to reach that 60 based on the changes he made last year. But we're getting.
I like your point about developing the skills that you're good at. And I think some orgs do that better than others. And I think even though Tampa has a vision of how they want pitchers to be and hitters to be, they're not going to force a hitter with launch, right? Or they're not going to force that power there. So, they're getting high contact, hard hits players, but they're not forcing them to hit dongs every at bat.
Right.
And I think that's really developing some hitters in that organization. Whereas Boston and other orgs, they just kind of seem to allow these players to search on their own for some sort of vision, and not really helping them or giving them much guidance.
Right. Do you have anything else at second that you want to share?
Not really. No, I had Jace at 10B and Gonzalez at 10A. So I did have an extra person there. And then what I said at the start that, I think this list is going to change as the game changes next year. And I think we'll start seeing the 5'7", 190 pound Johnsons or the the Perez's or even the Norby 5'10", 187, these more prototypical second basemen instead of pushing the Max Muncy's over there.
Sure. Or the Mike Moustakas.
Yeah.
Or that was so insane, right? Seeing second was so weird to me. I agree. It's such an interesting position just because you've got those top three, I guess four if you include Vargas. And then after that, it's really you're trying to compensate in a lot of ways. You're trying to compensate for one stat with another. And I don't know that I would be incredibly comfortable in Dynasty with any of from Norby on down, any of those guys being the heir apparent at second base for me. I think the top four, if you include Vargas, are prospects that I like and I think will become very, very good fantasy players. But after that, it's kind of a crapshoot. And like I said, if you can get Termarr, I picked Termarr Johnson second in our FYPD draft just now over Yoshida. And I do think that he's a superstar talent. To me, he's the highlight of this of second base. Any other baseball thoughts from you right now?
Nope. Where are we heading next? Are we going to third or short?
Third.
Okay, cool.
We'll see. Third is going to be fun. I will have Gunnar at third. I will have Vargas at third. But I think it'll probably become the Cam Collier show. It'll be a good time.
Yeah. He went, I'm impressed with our league. He went pretty early in the FYPD.
He went fifth, I believe.
6, right after
Or
Sanga.
six.
Yeah, that was a good pick.
Good stuff.
All right.
Appreciate you, brother.
All right. Take it
Talk
easy.
soon. All right.
All right.